Hello everyone. So as you guys probably know, Dark Souls is a game that involves a chosen undead going on a pilgrim to link the first flame in the hopes of saving the world from a coming age of dark and hopefully do away with the undead curse. Which is a fancy way of saying that they'll be going on a journey where they'll be slashed into pieces, crushed into a pulp, and thrown off of ledges until gravity becomes their most hated thing that they have ever seen. And while these things can be delivered to them by a whole host of mobs that are present in the game, there are some who stand out from the crowd. These are called bosses, and today in this video I'll be ranking all of the bosses that we'll be facing in Dark Souls. Now this list is going to be subjective and my personal opinion as to whether I find the boss to be fun, and which will mostly include the boss having good patterns, teaching the players something, and if they give good rewards or not. So without further ado, I think we should get into it. So the first boss that we'll be talking about is the Asylum Demon. Now the Asylum Demon is the very beginning boss of the game, found in the very first area of Northern Undead Asylum, who is guarding the exit of this asylum. Now this boss I would say is a solid B tier boss because I think it does a fairly decent job of teaching the player how the game works, which is that stamina is a thing in the game, and if it depletes, you cannot dodge to evade attacks, you cannot run to get some distance, nor can you attack to do damage. So you need to keep stamina in mind and let it regenerate from time to time. Also the boss has very slow attacking speed, so it does give you a decent window of regenerating your stamina while you continue to punish his slow attacks. The only thing I hate about this boss is the fact that the first time that you fight him, you have a straight sword hilt in your hand, which, yeah, that's just the nature of Dark Souls. It's supposed to be hard, I guess. Which is why the game hides your actual beginning weapon in an area that is you're supposed to take during this boss fight. So in the first encounter, you're not even supposed to fight the boss. You're just supposed to run towards the left through a gate that is on the left wall, and then you reach the actual beginning area of the game where you get your weapon and you kill some mobs and then do a plunging attack on the Asylum Demon to finally show him who's boss. Now, if you do manage to beat him with the straight sword hilt in the very first encounter, or you just pick black fire bombs as your starting gift, he is guaranteed to drop his hammer that he uses to mush you to a fine pulp. And that hammer is called the Demon's Great Hammer, and I think it's a decent weapon with good strength scaling. The only issue is no new player can ever use it because of the high strength requirement, which I find is very stupid, because why can't I just use that weapon? Because, you think that you would be rewarded for beating this boss with a shitty weapon, but nope, you don't. And that sucks, which is why I think it firmly goes in B tier. Anyway, so the next boss is the Tauros Demon, and I'm not gonna lie, Tauros Demon is like the reminder that I put on my phone for a particular task that I must do an hour or two later. Only for that alarm to be useless because I remembered to do the thing that I was supposed to do. And the reason why I say that about the Tauros Demon is because, what is the difference between this and the Asylum Demon? Both of them are slow attacking bosses with opportunities for the player to do plunging attacks on them, and they basically teach you the exact same thing, that stamina is an expendable resource. Now for the Asylum Demon, that makes sense because he's like the first boss. You barely fight anything before you even face the Asylum Demon. But the Tauros Demon, you can't even reach this boss without killing a bunch of mobs. So how is this boss why is this boss here? I guess that's my question. Also, the funny thing about this boss is that when you enter the arena, and if you don't deal with the archers that are on top of the tower that you ascended up to reach this boss, yeah, those archers are a bigger threat than the boss itself, which I find very funny. And also, I highly recommend that you deal with those archers first before you even deal with the Tauros Demon. Other than that, the Tauros Demon does give you a pretty decent weapon, I guess, in the Demon's Great Axe, but it's not a guaranteed drop. So, yeah, I can't place this boss any higher than C tier. But anyway, once you defeat the Tauros Demon, you have a choice. You can either ascend up the Undead Parish, reaching the church where the first bell is, where you'll be facing this boss, or you can go to the depths of the Undead Parish, and that depths area is guarded by this boss. Now I'm gonna say that for most people, you're probably going to ascend up first because that area is straightforward, and you'll be getting your first bell. So If you do that, the first boss that you face there is the Belfry Gargoyles. And the Belfry Gargoyles are easy A tier because I think they are a pretty decent boss. They have like decently fast attacks, but also not too fast to where they are overwhelming for the player. Also, I do not see people giving credit to this boss for a very important skill that it teaches the player. And that is, it's better to time your rolls and roll into a boss rather than roll away from the boss and dodge their attacks that way. And the reason why this boss is so decent at teaching the player that, because he's a large boss in a very small area. Because you fight him in the rooftops, and if you fall off the roof, you are dead. And the roof is not very large. However, it's also not like small enough to where you can't run away from this boss or dodge. However, players will quickly find out that running away from him means that you can't do anything to him either. So you have to learn to roll into him, since rolling away is not an option usually. The only thing I hate about the gargoyles is the fact that in the second phase, when the first gargoyle gets to about half HP, the game throws in another gargoyle which starts at only half HP. I don't personally understand the point of that, because why can't I just face this one gargoyle and be done with it? Why is there need to be two? Well, whatever the case, this boss is pretty decent. Not to mention, if you are skilled enough, you can cut its tail off, which not only removes like 2 of his attacks, which is really good, but also gives you the gargoyle's tail axe, which is actually a pretty decent weapon. And I highly recommend getting it, because early on it can help you a lot, especially when you reach the depths, because it gives you a lot of resistances buff. So yeah, I would say the Belfry Gargoyles are easily A tier and one of the best bosses in the entire game. Anyway, so the next boss that we'll be ranking is the Capra Demon, and this boss is the first boss that you face while you're trying to go below the Undead Parish. And I'm not gonna lie, just like his actual position in Dark Souls 1, he's also going in the down to D tier on our list, because he's just a terrible boss. This boss spawns with 2 dogs, which are actually a bigger threat than the boss itself. The arena in which you fight this boss is very claustrophobic and small, unlike the Belfry Gargoyle, where the space that you have to dodge is very small, but the arena itself is like, it's completely open because it's on a rooftop. This, however, takes place in a small garden type area, and it's very small. And that causes a lot of issues, because most of the time your camera just gets stuck behind a wall, preventing you from seeing what's actually happening in the fight. The dogs have an insanely high attack rate, not to mention they can even damage you very quickly thanks to bleed. And they can stagger you if you're not wearing decent armor, which allows this Capra Demon to just lay onto you with his heavy attacks, which can instantly kill any player at this point, which just really makes this fight suck a lot. Now, the recommendations that I would give for people to try and beat this boss is that if you go behind the boss, there is a staircase on the left side that you can go up to, and if you go up there, you can deal with the dogs one-on-one, because it's narrow enough to where both dogs can't run towards you at once, so they have to go in a line. That allows you to deal with the dogs first, because they are a bigger threat than the boss, so that way you can just go against the boss one-on-one. And if you're talking about the one-on-one against the Capra Demon, he's not that strong. His HP I think is even lower than the Tauros Demon, and while he does attack faster and has good damage, yeah, like once you defeat the dogs, he really is not that big of a threat. Not to mention later on in the game, just like the Tauros Demon, he becomes an actual enemy. And unlike the Tauros Demon, he actually feels fair to be a regular mob. So yeah, I would say that firmly places this boss in D tier. I would say that the Demon's Great Machete that you can get out of this guy is pretty useful, but it's not guaranteed. So yeah, that won't probably affect his ranking on this list. Anyway, so once you defeat the Capra Demon, you get the keys to the depths, which is the sewer area for the Lord Ran region. And in this place, you will be facing your next boss, which is the Gaping Dragon. And I'm not gonna lie, when I went into the depths, I did not expect a dragon to be my boss fight. I thought it would be some kind of alligator or rat or something like that. But nope, it's a dragon. For sure. But anyways, as for the Gaping Dragon boss fight, I think I can place it solidly in B tier. He's not as good as the Asylum Demon in my opinion, but he does teach you some basics about dragon combat in this game, to where hitting a dragon on the head does a lot more damage to them than attacking them on any other body part, and that pretty much every dragon that has a tail can be cut off, which not only cancels their tail whip attack, but also can give you a really nice weapon, I guess. Or at least the game makes you feel like it's a nice weapon. I'll talk about it sometime later, but yeah, those are the two main things that the Gaping Dragon teaches you. Also, one huge tip before I go on: when you reach the depths, make sure that you kill the channeler that is like hidden behind, I think, 3 giant rats. Killing him is super important because otherwise this channeler can fight you during the Gaping Dragon boss fight, and because he's so far up, you can't hit him, but he can hit you with his magic attacks. Not to mention he can buff the Gaping Dragon, so make sure that you kill him before you go into this boss fight. As for the Gaping Dragon himself, he doesn't have too many attacks. He has a stomp attack, he has a giant acid spewing attack, but none of them do like too much damage. The most controversial attack that the Gaping Dragon has is where he brings his head down and then he starts to walk into the direction where he's looking. And this attack is a little bit infamous because it has like bad hitboxes to where even if you dodge the Gaping Dragon's charge, it has like weird hitbox, so you still get hit regardless. And that can be a little bit of a problem. The only thing that can catch you off guard is the Gaping Dragon's tail whip attack, because that is a really fast attack, because all of his other attacks are like really slow and you can easily tell when he's doing them. But the tail whip attack just comes out of nowhere. Now, if you cut the tail, this attack obviously goes away, so that's a good thing. However, cutting his tail isn't really that much of worth it if you can just deal with his head. And that's because the weapon that you get is the Dragon King's Great Axe, and I'm not gonna lie, I personally do not like any other dragon weapons in Dark Souls 1. Simply because they don't get any scaling, their special moves consume way too much weapon durability, and because they don't get any scaling, they are usually not getting much buffs in terms of damage. Not to mention they are only upgradable through dragon scales, which is very rare to get and is like really annoying to farm. So in my opinion, it's just not a good weapon. Not to mention it requires like 50 strength or something, so you can't even use it by the time you even reach this boss fight. So that really sucks. But other than that, the Gaping Dragon is fine on his own, so I would place him firmly in B tier. So after defeating the Gaping Dragon, we get access to Blight Town, and crossing through its poisonous swamp, we reach our next boss, which is Chaos Witch Quelaag. And Chaos Witch Quelaag is the sister of Fair Lady and Ceaseless Discharge, and she also guards the final bell, probably your final bell, that you need to ring in order to reach Sen's Fortress. So as for Quelaag, she either would be like the high B tier or low A tier for me. I'm gonna say she's low A tier for now. She's definitely not as good as the Belfry Gargoyles, but she's pretty fun. She has like well telegraphed attacks. When she uses her sword to attack you, those attacks are like decently fast, but they only last for like 4 combos I think, so it's honestly not that bad. As for her spider attacks, they can be a little bit annoying, though not all of those attacks. Some of them are because, for example, one of the attacks that she does is a large blast, which unfortunately the tail is not even like present on the spider lower body. Instead, you have to look at Quelaag's actual human body, which when it goes, very down, then you can tell that, the explosion is about to happen. But most of the time, you won't be looking at this body because the safest place to fight Quelaag is on her sides. Though, be prepared to attack her quite a lot because Quelaag is one of the thickest bosses in the entire game. And no, I don't say that just because of her looks. She actually has, I think, one of the highest healths of any boss in the entire game. Like, even fully upgraded Zweihander will take a lot of slashes to kill Quelaag. And that is something, I would say that. As for rewards, Quelaag's rewards are honestly not amazing. I know that the Chaos Blade that you get from Quelaag's soul was once pretty good for PvP, but PvP is mostly dead in this game. So for PvE, Chaos Blade is pretty bad because it causes self-damage to the players. As for other weapon, that's not that amazing. I think it's called Quelaag's Fury Sword. So overall, the rewards are definitely better on the soul that you get from killing her, which is I think around 20 to 15,000. And of course you get Sen's Fortress and access to probably your favorite girl in Dark Souls. So I guess for that, she can definitely go up there in A tier. So after defeating Quelaag, you get access to Sen's Fortress, or since you become like a lot more stronger by the time you defeat her, you could take a trip back to the Northern Undead Asylum, the place you escaped from. And if you return there, that place has changed quite a lot since you have, last visited it. And if you don't remember, there is a demon that is present like just beside your cage that you were trapped in. And yeah, when you return, you can actually fight that demon. And that demon is different from the asylum demon, known as the stray demon. And stray demon, I'm just gonna say he's probably C tier. Maybe better than the Tauros demon. But honestly, I think the asylum demon is honestly the best version. The stray demon, on the other hand, is just a really annoying boss. Now, I said that I won't really, count the run back between bosses. But for stray demon, every time you want to fight this boss, you have to go back to the arena where you fought the asylum demon. That's not a big deal. There's a bonfire really close to that place. However, my issue is that every time you go there, the floor breaks and you take a lot of fall damage before you even fight the stray demon. And I'm not gonna lie, that is very annoying. To be honest, it doesn't really matter because the stray demon has really slow attacks. However, he has some BS going on with him, which is where he uses some magic attacks where a blast occurs where you are standing. So what happens here is that if you mistime your dodge, or if you just don't run away when he does it, yeah, you can be in a bit of a problem because the blast radius is unnecessarily large and it does a lot of damage. And just like Quelax, Stray Demon also has a lot of health. So this boss fight just drags on and honestly is not even that fun to fight. I think the Asylum Demon did its job pretty well because it was supposed to be an introductory boss. But introducing a boss with much higher health, needlessly higher damage, annoying gimmicks, and the fact that you take damage every time you reach this boss really doesn't make me, rate him pretty higher. The only reason I think he's higher than Capra Demon is because at least the rewards that you get out of him are decent. Okay, the Capra Demon's Great Machete is great, but the soul amount is terrible. As for defeating the Stray Demon, you get his, I think it's called the Demon Staff, and I think that is a decent weapon for, sorcery builds. Or, if you just wanna use that to poke people, yeah, it actually does a lot of damage for some reason. I don't know how Dark Souls, is balanced for magic users, but I've seen these magic staff do a lot of damage through melee attacks, and I think the demon staff that you get from Stray Demon does a lot of damage. But that's probably the only thing that is keeping him in C tier, because otherwise he would be down there with his buddy Capra Demon. But anyway, once you defeat this boss, you can finally go to the Sense Fortress, and climbing to its very roofs, you will face an Iron Golem. And Iron Golem... Okay, this boss fight can be very annoying if you didn't do an extra step, but the extra step is also annoying to do. So honestly, I think this boss can go into C tier as well. Now, is it better than the Tauros Demon? Probably not. So here's the thing about the Iron Golem. This boss fight can be very different for you if you did not defeat the giant that is behind this guy throwing fire bombs at you. So if you don't kill that particular giant, that giant will throw his fireballs at you during the boss fight of Iron Golem, essentially forcing you to play against the Iron Golem on that very narrow ledge where, you can use it against Iron Golem, but Iron Golem can use it against you as well. So that can be a huge issue because the majority part of the arena is not safe. So if you want my advice, just deal with that stupid giant before you deal with the Iron Golem. Now, unfortunately, that giant is very annoying to deal with because you have to fight him in a very small area and he has a bunch of AoE attacks. But just deal with it because it will make your life a lot more easy against the Iron Golem here. As for the Iron Golem, he is really slow. He does a decent amount of damage and he also has ranged attacks through his axe. But otherwise, the Iron Golem is not that amazing. A fun thing that you can do against the Iron Golem is that if you hit him on his legs, you can actually make him trip, and if you trip him on the smaller ledges, the Iron Golem can actually just fall off of the roof and just die instantly, which is very useful because otherwise this boss takes a lot of time to die because he just has a lot of resistances. But just be careful doing that because the Iron Golem has a deceptively fast grab attack, and if he grabs you while you're fighting him on that small ledge, chances are he's gonna throw you out of the arena as well. So that would be an instant failure. Also, there is a hidden bonfire just like beside Sense Fortress. So make sure to take that, otherwise you'll have to start from the very beginning bonfire in Undead Parish just outside of Sense Fortress. And that run back will really suck. But hopefully you first try this boss because honestly it's not that difficult. Just watch for his attacks, make sure you don't get grabbed, and yeah, you should be fine. So overall I would place it in C tier. So after you defeat the Iron Golem, you get access to Anor Londo, which involves you getting kidnapped by some demons and taken to the top of the wall that, separates Lordran from Anor Londo. But once you reach Anor Londo, you have to take a very strange path to progress forward. And if you defeated the stray demon before coming here, you can actually take the peculiar doll which miraculously appears in your prison that you were imprisoned in. And if you take that doll, you can enter the painted world of Ariamis, where the next boss appears, and that is Crossbreed Priscilla. Now, spoiler alert, if this was a waifu tier list, she would be going in S tier because, as per looks, she is my favorite girl in all of Dark Souls series. For personality, I might like some other girls more, but looks, she absolutely has them. But I should stop simping right now because this is not a waifu tier list. This is a boss tier list. As for Priscilla, I would say she's probably high B tier. I probably like her more than these guys, but yeah, I don't think she's as good as like the Belfry Gargoyles or Quelaag. Now, this is an optional boss fight, so once you enter the battle arena for Priscilla, Priscilla kindly asks you to leave the painted world of Ariamis. Which honestly, after those Corvians pecked my face out and the poisonous dragon just, jabaited me into coming close to him only for me to get, absolutely slammed by his poisonous breath, yeah, I would gladly get out of that place. But if you decide to be an evil guy and fight Priscilla instead of, taking her advice and just taking a plunge, you will have to fight a girl that forces you to bring out your inner foot fetishist out. And yes, I do mean that literally because when you engage the battle against Priscilla, Priscilla goes invisible. And the only way to tell her where she is by looking at her footprints and then triangulating where she actually might be so that you can attack her and break her poise. Once you break her poise, she becomes visible again, which does make the boss fight a lot more easier. Now, just be careful that you break her poise early on because, far as I remember, Priscilla's weapon grants her the lifesteal ability, which means if she damages you, she takes all of that HP that she took from you and adds it to her own health bar, so she heals from attacking you. So just be careful of that. Now, as for your rewards for defeating Priscilla, now I would say Priscilla's tail is like really annoying to cut if you fail to cut it during the initial attack that you have to do in order to start this boss fight. But if you do manage to cut it, you get Priscilla's dagger, which is not that amazing. It's not one of the best daggers in the game, but hey, at least it gives you some sick dance moves, I guess. But other than that, the biggest reason to kill her would be for her Life Earned Scythe. Now, far as I know, the Life Earned Scythe, when fully upgraded, is the strongest scythe in Dark Souls 1. However, I am personally not a big fan of the Life Earned Scythe because even though for Priscilla it works as, its namesake, where it provides you the Life Hunt ability, but when the player uses it, for some reason that weapon causes bleed buildup into players. Now don't get me wrong, the Life Earned Scythe has a really high bleed buildup and also does a lot of damage. But the bleed self buildup on the player is also pretty huge, and that can cause a lot of problems because bleed proc will do a lot of damage. And considering that you won't be fighting Priscilla until like the later bosses of the game, yeah, that can be a huge issue. So honestly, if you want to use a scythe, just use the Great Scythe. It may not be as strong as the Life Earned Scythe, but the lack of self bleed buildup on the player is definitely a huge bonus in that scythe's favor. Otherwise, there's really no reason to kill Priscilla or even come to the painted world of Ariamis. There's really not much to see here. And now, finally, Once you defeat Priscilla or you just skip the painted world of Arya Mace, you can reach the very end of Anor Londo, the princess's chambers, which are guarded by honestly the goats of the Dark Souls franchise, known as Orstein and Smough. And remember when I said that Dark Souls really only excels in one-on-one combat, not in like 1v2 combat or 2v2 combat? While for the 90% of the entire franchise that might be true, there's an exception to always that rule, and that exception in this game is Orstein and Smough, which I would say is our tier list's first S tier boss, because this boss fight is honestly pretty amazing. Now, for a new player, you will probably get destroyed by these two, because yeah, you have to fight two bosses at once, and they can be a little bit overwhelming at first. However, once you start to learn their patterns and their method of attacking, you can definitely beat this boss like pretty easily, and you can have a lot of fun with this. Now, one advice that I would say is to not divide your damage between these two bosses, because spoiler alert for this boss fight, but once you kill one of them, the other simply absorbs the power of their fallen friend and gains all of their HP back while also becoming a super version of themselves, which basically means that their size grows a little bit bigger and they get a electric butt slam attack. But other than that, this boss is pretty good. Like, it's difficult to describe it in words, but if you play this boss fight, you can have a lot of fun. Now, another tip that I would like to give you is that don't be distracted by Smough destroying all the pillars that are around in this boss fight arena. Those are actually the key to beating this boss, because those pillars block one of the guys while you can focus on the other. Most of the time they can help you block Smough, so you can focus your attention on Orstein. Orstein is probably going to be the guy that most people will kill first, because Orstein has a lot of dash attacks which allow you to separate him from Smough, because Smough takes a lot of time reaching you. Not to mention his attacks are really slow, but just be careful, they have some AoE properties, so they can knock you back and they can also do a lot of damage. As for Orstein, I've noticed that if you use weapons like the halberd or the spear, like I did on my first playthrough, that can be a bit of a problem, because Orstein likes to side roll your attacks, and side rolling really works well against spears and halberds. However, you may still want to use those weapons because they are great against Smough. Whereas if you use like slashing weapons like the Zweihander that I used on my playthrough, that's really good against Orstein, because side jumping isn't really going to help him to dodge the Zweihander. But it really sucks against Smough, because Smough's hammer actually acts like a shield for him. Because if you hit this hammer instead of Smough, Smough just takes no damage. So that hammer has a separate hitbox which prevents Smough from taking any damage. It's basically like a physical object. And that can be a major issue for people who are using slashing weapons, because slashing weapons struggle a lot because of this hammer. But other than that, the only real decision would be which guy you kill last, because whoever you kill at the end is determinant of your rewards that you get. So if you defeat Smough last, you get Smough's great hammer by infusing his soul. Or if you defeat Orstein, you get the Leo ring, or you can get Orstein's spear. Personally, I think as for rewards, killing Orstein later is probably better, because the Leo ring is honestly pretty amazing. However, Orstein is also much more difficult to defeat for last, because Orstein is the one that usually comes after the player like really aggressively, whereas Smough, he is usually in the background just trying to reach you most of the time, whilst Orstein tries to distract you from him. So yeah, that can be a little bit difficult, but if you manage to pull it off, I guess you do get better rewards. So overall, the rewards for this fight are pretty good, because Smough's great hammer is also pretty good for strength builds, and the boss fight is really fun to fight. So yeah, this boss goes in S tier, and I don't think anybody else has any other opinion about this boss. Pretty much everybody that I've seen likes Orstein and Smough. So after defeating Orstein and Smough, you finally get an audience with Guinevere, the Princess of Sunlight, who gives you the Lord Vessel, which finally allows you to enter those weird areas that were blocked by a yellow light, so that you can finally gain access to Lord bosses, or the bosses that have Lord Soul fragments with them. So let's talk about those guys, shall we? So the first one that I think most people are going to go after is Seath the Scaleless, because he's in Anor Londo only. And Seath honestly is pretty bad in my opinion. I'm gonna say he's bottom seat here. So the problem with Seath the Scaleless is like a lot. So the first time you face Seath, you're actually meant to die in this boss fight. Not to mention, a terrible thing that can happen is that the crystals that Seath tries to kill you with can apply curse, and this stupid curse buildup can happen even when you die. So even when you have died, as long as the you died screen hasn't come up, you can actually still get curse buildup, and if that buildup completes even when you have died, you will get cursed, which is really annoying. Honestly, Seath is just a terrible boss in that regard. But once you actually fight him in the Crystal Cave, which is where you go next after being captured, you can destroy the immortal crystal that keeps Seath alive and also gives him that crazy health regen. And then you can finally defeat this boss. And honestly, the boss fight is just pretty bad. Like, all Seath really does is just some AoE attacks where he whips his many tails around. And that is a real damn shame that Seath really doesn't have much, considering he is an archdragon in the lore of Dark Souls. And archdragons are supposed to be like really powerful, and they're supposed to be very antique, considering the gods had to like specifically create weapons to destroy their stone scales. I know Seath doesn't have them, but still, the fact that he's the lamest dragon in the entire game just sucks. Like, really sucks. I would say even the Hydra that people find annoying to fight is probably a better fight than Seath is. Now, as for defeating Seath, I think the best reward you can get out of Seath is by cutting his tail. So, a thing about Lord Soul bosses is that they all drop a lot of souls, like I think around 60,000 or something. So that's pretty good. But the rewards is where these bosses can suck a lot. And for Seath, the weapon you get by destroying his tail, which by the way is pretty hard to do because Seath can keep his central tail, which you need to cut out of your reach. That weapon is the Moonlight Greatsword, which is a staple in the Souls franchise. It's pretty much in every game except for I think Sekiro. But the Moonlight Greatsword in Dark Souls 1 is not great until you reach New Game Plus, because by the time you reach Seath, all the bosses that are left are like, Grey Lord Nito, the Witch of Izalith, and I guess all the DLC bosses and Gwyn, or even the Four Kings. But the unfortunate thing about all these bosses is that they're all very resistant to magic, and Moonlight Greatsword does not do anything against them. There are like weapons that easily outclass the Moonlight Greatsword. It's great in New Game Plus because then you can fight all of these other guys again just with better stats, and they don't resist magic, so Moonlight Greatsword can do a lot of damage. But unfortunately, in the end game, the Moonlight Greatsword really doesn't do much, and honestly not even worth it, because it's a lot of pain to actually cut Seath's tail. But other than that, Seath is probably the lamest dragon in the entire game. Not to mention, if you go back to like the first area where you meet Seath after he has left for the Crystal Cave, you can get access to the Crystal Ember, which a huge spoiler, but I think this is necessary for you to learn. Unless you are doing a build with the red tier stone ring and you're just planning to one-shot every boss, don't use the Crystal Ember to infuse your weapons with the crystal element, because it really sucks. It's one of the worst things that you can ever do. Sure, it can allow you to one-shot bosses, because what the crystal weapons do is that they essentially have the exact same effect as raw weapons, except they keep their scalings, which sounds really good. But crystal weapons break really quickly, they cannot be repaired, a huge problem, and they are also very costly to upgrade. So yeah, just make sure that unless you're going for a specific red tier stone ring playthrough, don't use the Crystal Ember. And just because of all of that, Seath goes in bottom C tier. But once you defeat Seath the Scaleless, now you can go back to the other side of the wall and fight the other bosses that you need to deal with. So I'm gonna say the next one, you probably are gonna go back to your favorite lady and progress through that area. Now once you go to the Demon Ruins, the first boss you face is Ceaseless Discharge, who is the brother of Quelaag and the Fair Lady. Now the Ceaseless Discharge is I would say is probably D tier, just like the Capra Demon, and the reason is the reward that you get for killing Ceaseless is not that amazing. I would say it's definitely worth it to kill him earlier, like as soon as you defeat Quelaag, rather than wait on all of these bosses. But if you do not wait for that long, or like if you do wait for that long, the reward you get for killing Ceaseless is not that great. Ceaseless, pretty much everybody cheeses him because otherwise his actual boss fight just really sucks. He has a bunch of AoE attacks that are like almost impossible to dodge, and they do a lot of damage. Not to mention, Ceaseless gives you very few opportunities to actually damage him because he's always out of your reach. So yeah, because of that, Ceaseless is just a terrible boss, and honestly, if you skip this guy by cheesing him, nobody's gonna disown you. Anyway, so once you defeat the Ceaseless Discharge, the lava that covers the entire Izalith ruins gets subsided and you can finally enter that place. Now this place sucks a lot, pretty much everybody hates it, and one of the reasons that people hate it is this boss right here, Demon Fire Sage, and this is going in the bottom of D tier because it's literally the exact same thing as the Stray Demon with the exact same moveset, and the most stupid thing, exact same fire weakness despite being called the Demon Fire Sage and being on fire. Yeah, this boss is just terrible. Not to mention, I'm pretty sure even the rewards are exactly the same as well. Not to mention that this boss fight arena, it has a bunch of roots that are coming into it which block you mid-roll or just when you're trying to run away from his attacks. And I'm not gonna lie, this is just stupid, and because of that, the Demon Fire Sage goes in D tier. There's really not much to discuss about this guy. But once you defeat the Demon Fire Sage, you get to the boss that is probably the reason why people love the Fair Lady so much. And that is the Centipede Demon. And yeah, I would say I like the Centipede Demon at least better than these two because at least it's a unique boss. But there are many legitimate reasons to hate the Centipede Demon. First of all, I always confuse his name with the Centipede Dragon, which is just not a thing at all, because he looks a lot like a dragon. Second of all, this boss arena that the Centipede Demon has is absolutely garbage. It's like completely filled with lava. What the boss fight actually includes is when you enter the arena, you're supposed to jump on some like really narrow rocks and then reach a slightly bigger arena where you can finally fight the Centipede Demon, or at least you can until the Centipede Demon decides to walk towards you, because otherwise sometimes he just from a range throws his head towards you to attack you, and yeah, they give you very few opportunities to attack them. Now another annoying thing that can happen in this boss fight is that once you have done enough damage to the demon, one of his heads can sometimes get separated, and that head acts as a separate enemy. Now that head doesn't have too much health, so you should probably kill it. Not to mention, you probably want to kill it, considering killing it gives you a ring that allows you to walk on lava while taking like very little damage. But if you're focusing on the demon, sometimes the camera just automatically goes towards the head that has fallen off, and that can be very annoying. Speaking of the camera, because that arena that you fight in these against Centipede Demon is so small, the exact same issue with the Capra Demon happens here as well. If you use lock on, you just cannot see what is happening on the screen, and it's just a complete mess. Honestly, just respect the Fair Lady, join her covenant, give her 30 humanities, and skip both of these garbage bosses, because yeah, they are just not worth your time. If you give her 30 humanities, she will just open up the elevator, I think that is just below Quelax's arena, and that can straight away take you to the Lord Boss of this area. Speaking of the Lord Boss of the Izalith area, that is the Bed of Chaos, and you know what? I really cannot do justice to this boss without giving it a separate row of its own. So yeah, let's just do that right now. Let's call it, yeah, this might be better. Peak difficulty, because let's just be honest here, the Witch of Izalith, who has been transformed into this thing called the Bed of Chaos, is truly the epitome and the toughest boss Dark Souls has ever produced. Why? Because this boss abuses the most broken mechanic in all of Dark Souls franchise, gravity. And anybody who disagrees with it is just straight up lying to you, or they're stupid. Because Bed of Chaos is absolutely broken, and this boss is just not balanced at all. It is so broken that despite giving the player the opportunity to kill this boss with just their bare hands, almost nobody's gonna ever do it. So yeah, Bed of Chaos is just in a league of its own. But anyway, after you defeat the Bed of Chaos, you can make your way through the catacombs, and the catacombs are just an entire beast on their own. Many people have a lot of memories of them by going, left when at the beginning of the game after defeating the Asylum Demon and getting a brutal reminder that Dark Souls is not a new game friendly game now, is it? But anyway, once you defeat all of these guys, you can finally, I guess, go to the catacombs because at this point you should be strong enough to deal with all the challenges. And once you go below the catacombs, past those absolutely terrible bone wheel skeletons, you get to Pinwheel, the next boss on our list. And honestly, this is another special case where I just cannot do justice to this boss without giving him a separate tier for its own. And honestly, there's really not anything to change here. Peak difficulty, yeah, let's just have all of the Dark Souls bosses just be surrounded with peak difficulty, And there we go, that's Pinwheel. I mean, obviously he's going to be tough, bro. He has like the strongest enemy in the game acting as its guardian. Not to mention, the reward for killing Pinwheel is actually pretty amazing because, you get the Rite of Kindling, which gives you the ability to kindle your flame or bonfires further so that you can get 20 Estus, which is pretty broken. And I guess, yeah, Miyazaki probably hated that a lot because in the later games that amount was reduced severely. But as for Pinwheel, yeah, there's really not much to say here. You need to experience this boss on its own. I don't think I should be spoiling this boss for you guys. Just know he is absolutely peak difficulty and you will have to bust out some of your most broken strategies in order to defeat him. And also, in order to get that 1 in 3 chance to get the Mask of the Father for your Giant Dad build. Because we all know Giant Dad is a broken ass build, isn't it? But anyways, coming to the ground level, we have the next Lord Soul boss, who is Grave Lord Nito. Now I'm not gonna lie, Nito looks very sick. He has a very cool design, I would say. However, that's the only compliment I'm gonna give to Gravelord Nito because Gravelord Nito is absolutely D tier. I detest Gravelord Nito and it's a terrible boss. Why? Let's talk about it. First of all, just like the Stray Demon, every time you enter his arena, you have to fall off of a giant height, which causes a lot of damage. And once Nito actually comes to fight you, most of the time he's not even fighting you. The ones who are actually fighting you are his skeletons that he spawns. Which is just perfect because everybody loved fighting skeletons in this game now, did they? Also, Nito's attacks are just like almost non-existent. Far as I know, I've only ever seen Nito do like 4 attacks. And yeah, the 4 attacks he does are like, they're only difficult to dodge because you cannot focus on Nito without, getting wrecked by his skeletons. So honestly, just take my advice. Go to the secret room just beside the bonfire or the second bonfire in Orlando. Get the Havel set and just Havel tank Nito to death. Nobody's going to disown you for doing that. Also the rewards. While the souls are obviously great, as I said in the Seath section, the weapons that you get are not that amazing. And the magic attack that you get from Gravelord Nito is absolutely terrible. It's funny that the best thing that I think you can get from Gravelord Nito, you get without even killing him. In order to get that item, you need to go very early on below the catacombs, reach Nito through a secret coffin that is just beside a Titanite demon while grabbing an Eye of Death behind him, and join his covenant, at doing which gives you the Gravelord Curved Sword, I think it's called. Now that weapon is pretty good, especially early on because it has a lot of damage. Not to mention Demon Titanite is like easy to get. But that's not attained through the boss fight. That is attained through a covenant. So yeah, Nito is absolutely D tier. I just do not like this boss. By the way, speaking of awful bosses, the next up is Dark Sun Gwendolyn. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, people who do not put Dark Sun Gwendolyn on their waifu tier list for Dark Souls are absolutely doing everybody a disservice because, come on guys, this is just top tier, top tier personality among Dark Souls waifus, isn't it? But Dark Sun Gwendolyn, yeah, let's talk about his or her amazing attacks, which is, one is a soul spear attack which can go through walls. One is a flurry of arrows that she shoots at you or he shoots at you, and the other is, yeah, we don't need to talk about this. He only has 3 attacks, which are easily dodgeable, and then once you get close to him, he teleports away. Yeah, not exactly the kind of boss that I would like to, call even a boss. Not to mention, just like Nito, the best item that you can get from him isn't even got from the, boss fight itself. Instead, you get it by joining his covenant. And unlike Nito's covenant, which only requires you to get like one Eye of Death, for Dark Souls and Gwendolyn, far as I remember, you need to get like all 30 of that weird item whose name I don't even remember. And farming that thing is just absolutely painful. But if you do that, you get the Dark Moon Blade magic, and you pair that thing with a fully upgraded Painting Guardian sword, and you have the best weapon in Dark Souls 1. But other than that, Gwendolyn is complete garbage, and he is a D tier boss. But anyway, once we deal with Nito and Dark Souls and Gwendolyn's nonsense. Oh wait, never mind. I just noticed that the next boss is also in their, category, which is the Moonlight Butterfly. Man, what is with the tier list right now? We have the 3 of the worst bosses in the game just put together. But anyway, let's talk about why the Moonlight Butterfly sucks. It stays out of your range just like Ceaseless does, but it has a lot of magic attacks that you're constantly forced to dodge, and they do a lot of damage. And they also have, like, some of the magic attacks have some AoE properties. Not to mention, some of them can last longer than your roll, so you can just like roll to dodge one attack only to be hit by the other. And the Moonlight Butterfly just gives you very little opportunity to attack it. Now hopefully you have a strong weapon when you actually fight this thing, because otherwise it can take you many cycles of the Moonlight Butterfly getting tired so that you can finally kill it. As for the rewards for killing Moonlight Butterfly, I guess the best reward would be the ember that you get behind the Moonlight Butterfly boss fight, which I guess is cool, but it's not that amazing. Also, the weapons that you get from killing the Moonlight Butterfly are not amazing, and the soul amount is not amazing either. It definitely doesn't help to pay the bills for the Crest of Artorias, which we need to get to our next boss. Now the next boss being the friend of Knight Artorias, Great Grey Wolf Sif, which I have recently learned is actually a female, not a male. So Great Grey Wolf Sif, my personal experience would tell me to put this in C tier, but I know that people say it's an okay boss. I would put it in top of C tier, sure. The issues that I have with Sif is that she just jumps so much, not to mention if she jumps onto you, her paws can do like a little bit of chip damage towards you, which isn't that big of a deal, except when it staggers you, because sometimes you can get chipped like 2 times and that staggers you, and yeah, that can be a problem, especially if you're trying to attack Sif. But other than that, I think Sif has well telegraphed attacks, her speed is not that high, although she's not slow either. So yeah, we just have to be patient in this boss fight. But it doesn't test the patience as badly as the Moonlight Butterfly does or the Ceaseless does, so I think it's fine. The rewards I don't think are that amazing, but this is not a skippable boss. This is a mandatory boss because defeating her gives you the Covenant of Artorias, which is needed to get to your final Lord Soul. But other than that, I don't really have much to say about Great Grey Wolf Sif. She's honestly more cool for her lore in the game than she actually is for a boss fight. But as a boss fight, she's not completely terrible, so I will put her in C tier. But once we get the Covenant of Artorias ring, we have to go through the new Londo Ruins, which is my paralysis demon in this game, because yeah, unlike people who went left and got destroyed by the skeletons, I went downwards, and that was not a fun time. So yeah, once I did get the strength and the ability to actually hit ghosts, I could finally travel to the Abyss, and there you fight the 4 Kings boss fight. The 4 Kings, I would say, is a solid A tier boss. The only things I hate about the 4 Kings boss fight is that it's a DPS race. By that I means is that when you start the fight, only one of the 4 Kings spawns. But if you don't kill the initial guy quickly, more 4 Kings will come, and then it turns into a gank boss fight, which I think can be like, I think it can be a 1v3 boss at max, because that's the max I have seen, before he inevitably killed me. But yeah, this boss fight is like really difficult, especially if you do this early on, because spoiler alert, for the secret ending of the game, you need to beat this boss like super early on, even before you get the Lord Vessel. And that can be really difficult to do considering the four kings are like really high health enemies, and which makes sense because they are a lord boss. But you can defeat them early on because Sif honestly is not that difficult. The only issue would be to either beat the Hydra or get the Crest of Artorias from your boy Andre, but that requires 20,000 soul. But anyway, as for the four kings, the boss fight is otherwise okay. Like if you have high enough damage, I think you can have fun dodging their attacks, which honestly are well telegraphed and are decently fast. The only attack that I hate is their like magic arc attack, which just follows you for so long, and it takes like forever for that attack to disappear. Other than that, their grabs can be real BS because the grab just has such long range, and because you have to constantly stay really close to the four kings to actually damage them, most of the time you won't be able to actually dodge their grab attack, and that will do a lot of damage to you. But if you have high enough damage output, the four kings is not that big of a deal. But because this boss fight can happen pretty quickly, I'll put in solidly and low A tier. But anyway, once you have done all the Lord bosses, I would say you're probably strong enough to do the DLC bosses next, which are the next topic on our list. So in the DLC, you need to defeat the Hydra, which I guess is kinda something that you can do in order to skip getting the Crest of Artorias so that you can defeat Sif. But once you defeat the Hydra and you can do some other steps, you get access to the DLC, and the very first thing that you face in the DLC area is a boss named Sanctuary Guardian. Now Sanctuary Guardian, I'm just gonna put it in low C. The only reason I put him in low C is because the Sanctuary Guardian just does a lot of damage for some reason. Like especially from his lightning attacks, which are like hard to dodge because they have some AoE properties. Not to mention they come out really fast. Not to mention their telegraphy is also sometimes not that great, so it's hard to tell when he's actually doing them. Otherwise, his melee combos can last for like pretty long. However, the advantage that the player has is that they have like poor range. So if you're like far enough, he won't be able to hit you. But his fast speed can be a little bit annoying because that gives you very little opportunity to actually attack him. Now on the plus side, he doesn't have too much health, so at least there's that. But you can, just like dragons, cut his tail off, which gives you, I think, probably the most powerful whip in the entire game, though I'm not sure. It might be the most powerful whip by base damage, but it's definitely not as good as the other whips that you can get, which can like proc bleed faster than this one. So yeah, that probably is the only thing that you will be getting out of this boss, if you even manage to cut the tail. Otherwise, I don't think Sanctuary Guardian drops anything that is super amazing. So that's why I put him promptly in lower C. But then once you defeat the Sanctuary Guardian, you can finally fight probably the peak boss fight of Dark Souls 1. Knight Artorias, in my opinion, is the best boss fight in the entire game, and honestly, it's not that hard to see why. He has really fast attacks, but they are well telegraphed. He will punish you for being too greedy or just being too defensive. And you can punish him as well if you learn his timings correctly. He has some BS attacks, and he also can apply this weird buff on himself, which just adds a lot more damage than he actually does. But you can stagger him out of that buff stage, so you definitely can do something. You don't have to wait. And because this boss fight just goes so fast, and it's just fun to do because his attacks are like decently fast, I would say he's definitely an S tier boss. He's like probably the best boss in the entire game. He's my personal favorite boss of the entire game, so he's definitely going in S tier. As for the rewards, you get the Abyss Greatsword if you decide to keep his soul rather than give it away to the other knight. I don't know the covenant of the knight that Artorias was part of. I know Orstein was a part of it as well, but one of the members comes to you, or like in the arena where Artorias dies, and she asks you for the soul. So if you keep it for yourself, you can make it into the Abyss Greatsword, which is honestly, I think, pretty good. So yeah, but I think the dagger that she gives you in return for his soul is also pretty good. The only unfortunate thing is both of these weapons will probably be used in New Game Plus, because I doubt anybody will be able to beat Artorias in early game. He's definitely supposed to be done in later games, so that when you have like better endurance. So yeah, Knight Artorias is the best boss fight in the entire game. And then we face the final boss of the DLC story, at least, and that is Manus, the Father of Abyss. He may have the coolest title of all of the bosses, But honestly, Manus, I would say, is probably high A tier. I really like Manus. I know a lot of people don't like Manus because he has just a lot of, fast attacks. Like, for example, his rage attack, which is just a really large combo, and if you get hit by even one other attack that he throws at you, you're just completely staggered and just caught in his combo. However, I think you can definitely dodge it by just like trying to dodge behind him. That way he has a hard time hitting you, or just maintain a decent distance away from him. That way you can just always run away from the attack, because honestly doesn't have that great of a range. The other BS he does is with his magic attack, or the only one of the magic attacks where he summons a lot of humanities around him, and then the humanities just spread out and then converge in. That attack is like really BS because you can't really most of the time dodge it. The way to dodge it is, I think you have to use the broken pendant that you actually need in order to get inside the DLC. Now, if you use that broken pendant, Manus' fight honestly is not that bad. I think it prevents you from getting hit by his magic attacks. His melee attacks are fine. Yeah, sure, there are sometimes like hitbox issues with Manus because all of his like slam attacks have lingering AoE attacks. But honestly, if you just time your dodges right, which honestly is not that difficult to do in this boss, Manus can be pretty fun, and because of that I put him in high A tier. I'm not gonna put him in S tier with like Orstian Smo and Artorias because, as I said, he has 2 BS attacks, and the rewards, while the rewards are pretty decent, it's like really late in the game. Like at this point, the reward of a boss that you can possibly get, which is like actually useful to you, would be the souls that the boss gives you. The weapons are probably only going to be used in New Game Plus, because by this time you probably would have used all of your upgrade materials, and like there's just not much content left for you to use this weapon on. So because of that, Manus goes in top of A tier. And then we have an optional boss in the DLC. Now this boss can actually be defeated before Manus, and this boss is Black Dragon Calamite, and I'm not gonna lie, I really like Calamite. I think he's one of the best bosses in all of Soul series. Definitely better than the dragons in Elden Ring, I can tell you that much. But as for Calamite himself, he has a lot of cool moves. He has like a lot of fast attacks, but he also has like openings where he breathes fire all over the place. That can help you a lot because his head is exposed, so you can hit him. His grab attack is honestly pretty weird. Like, it doesn't do too much damage, but instead it has like life and properties. So where if he does damage to you, he can heal back from all that damage. Now if you cut Calamite's tail, I think it gives you a decent dragon weapon. However, cutting Calamite's tail is by far one of the hardest things that you can do in the game, because Calamite just does not expose himself to attacks a lot. He's like the fastest dragon in the entire game. Now some of his attacks are BS, like his face swipe attack, where he uses his face to swipe at you. Now the problem with this attack is that if you roll to dodge this attack but you didn't roll far enough, Calamite's face can drag you along with you, and once your roll ends, you will take damage from that swipe attack anyway, and that can be a little bit of a BS. Not to mention his attack where he jumps up in the air and then spews fire below can be a hard to dodge if you don't see it coming, which usually you don't get to see it coming because Calamite just does it instantly, so that can be an issue. But other than that, Calamite is just really fun to fight. He doesn't have too much health, but he also doesn't have like really low health. And his other attacks are pretty fun to dodge, and he also leaves like opening for you to actually hit his head. That way you can, speed up the boss fight if you are good at them. So because of that, Calamite goes in A tier. And last, we have the ultimate lord that brought the Age of Fire, Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, or in the game, he is the Lord of Cinder. And I am not gonna lie, this might be a hot take, but this boss is garbage. It's just not good. He might not be as bad as these guys here, but he's definitely not as good as any of the bosses that are above him. Okay, maybe putting Gwyn like below Seath is kind of an illegal thing to do. You know what? Seath can come in D tier, it doesn't matter too much. He's probably worse. He's probably better than Centipede Dragon, let's just be honest here. But yeah, maybe Seath is here. Yeah, so Gwyn is definitely better than Seath. But Gwyn, honestly, I'm just gonna say this. This boss might feel cool to fight, but in reality, this boss just does not belong in Dark Souls 1. Honestly, even for Dark Souls 3, I would say Gwyn's attacks are just terribly designed, because many of Gwyn's attacks are just completely unpredictable. And they do a lot of damage. Like Havel tanking, in my opinion, is just not an option against Gwyn, because even if he doesn't break your poise with his attacks, he just does so much damage. And yeah, it can be a really big problem to deal with Gwyn. And honestly, that just sucks, because this is the last boss of the game, and most of Dark Souls games have like, really cool last bosses. Well, I guess Dark Souls 1 and 2 are exceptions to that, but still. As for Gwyn, another disappointment that we have is that in the intro scene of the game, we see Gwyn using his lightning spear to destroy the Archdragon's stone scales, which keep them immortal. Yet in his boss fight, he doesn't use lightning at all. In fact, the only element that we can attribute to Gwyn is the fire that comes from his sword. He doesn't even have like some flame sling attacks or something like that you would expect from a Lord of Cinder at the very least. I know he's not the Lord of Sunlight anymore because his fire has faded, which I guess might be the reason, canonically at least, why Gwyn can't use lightning bolt. But come on guys, like if the Nameless King can use them in Dark Souls 3, why can't Gwyn use lightning? That is just so stupid. Luckily, this boss fight was improved in Dark Souls 3 with the Soul of Cinder, but Gwyn as it stands just is not a good boss. Unpredictable attacks, very high damage, and he just doesn't uses his cool lower accurate attacks, including the lightning attacks. And because of all that, not to mention the reward you get for defeating Gwyn is like a decent fire sword, I would say, but again only usable in New Game Plus. So yeah, because of that, Gwyn goes in D tier. But yeah, there you go. That's my ranking of all of the bosses in Dark Souls 1. I'm sorry this video took a long time to make. I got a sore throat, so I couldn't speak really well. So yeah, because of that, I had to delay this video quite a lot. But I finally managed to make it, and this is my tier list. If you have any disagreements, then you can put those in the comment section as well. Also, if you agree, then leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And the comment section, other than telling me your opinion about the ranking, whether you would put a boss higher or lower, do tell me of any other games that you would like me to play, or if there is any other tier list idea that you would like me to do. But other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all in the next one.